Hey Burns, how's it?
Well, another week of doctors, Dick. I'm sure you know what the that feeling is.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of appointments coming up over the next 2 weeks, so I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I bounce around from doctor to doctor, and then occasionally have a free hour or two in my you know, and that's and then I use that to put bandages on myself, and I managed to fall out of bed again. I'm
Well,
I'm saying I'm saying this because our listeners are probably clueless uh, to the things we go through, but at least we both laugh about them.
yeah.
It, isn't it fun being in your 70s?
Now remember, growing old is not for wimps.
That's for sure. I agree.
But I'm finally really happy with my medical staff, except my dentist who decided I needed a total gum, whatever cleaning type thing. I told him, you're the only guy whose copay I have to pay. I don't have to pay anybody else's, number one. And I'm kind of thinking it's a waste of money at my age. My teeth are going to outlast me.
Right, right. Yeah, I
But
hear you.
he says, well, and of course, Millie says the same thing. Well, if you get, teeth problems and cause brain tumors and whatever else. So I follow orders and march on.
Yeah, I've always heard that. I don't know if it's an old wives' tale or true, but they say if your gums aren't healthy, you can have heart issues. So
Yeah,
that's a
well, even the vet says that. Ollie's going in next week to have his annual tooth cleaning. And for dogs and stuff, they say the basic cause of heart problems and brain problems and stuff in dogs is bad teeth.
be darned. Well,
So I don't know. Okay, we're on a switch again. We're going to stay off of politics for a while since the world is in a suck stage, and we're going to talk about travel. And I
yeah,
got
we today is podcast 39, if my count's correct.
I don't
And
know.
in our last discussion of travel locations, you handled international and I handled domestic, was podcast 37. And we each identified uh, 6 venues. And if I'm not mistaken, Dick, I think in our series of podcasts, that was the most viewed. It seemed like the change of pace was good for our viewers, and they kind of appreciated us getting off of politics. So we decided this week we'd go back to it and uh, identify some additional places to travel to, particularly with summer coming up. Although, depending on your age, you don't necessarily have to be limited to summer travel. But once again, I'll cover the US and you'll cover the international, okay?
Yeah, and I've got some good hints today of some places I really like. I'll give you a hint. Lobster in a restaurant runs about $40. I'm going to tell you where you can get a lobster fresh out of the water for $5.
Wow. Well, I dearly love lobsters, so I'll look forward to hearing that one.
Well, I've also got the mussels and the oysters.
Having never spent $5 for a lobster, I obviously have not been to whatever place you're going to talk about. But
I'm going to tell you.
okay. So you want me to kick it off?
Yeah, please.
All right. This is a prelude, and particularly with my first choice today. And this is kind of a point counterpoint to your international travel, which I wish I had done more of in my life. You've done so much of it, but I would just quickly say that there are a lot of great places here in the United States in terms of, beauty, topography, culture, varying landscapes that you can do well to at least get your travel legs here in the U.S. And then maybe move on to the more exotic venues that you and your wife Millie have seen over the years. So I'm going to start with Yellowstone National Park. And I think some of the viewers were surprised that in my original top 6 in podcast 37, I didn't mention Yellowstone. I did select among the 6 the Grand Tetons. And Yellowstone National Park is just north of the Tetons. But the reason is I opened with Yosemite as my number 1 choice, if you recall, Dick. And I said, if God would grant me the wish to have heaven on earth, so to speak, once I go to my grave, I'd love nothing better than to wake up for all eternity in Yosemite. And that's basically because Yosemite Valley, you get one of the grandest views of a national park that I know of in the United States, and I've visited a lot of them. So for that reason, and also the grandeur of the Grand Tetons, I didn't select Yellowstone the first time through with my top 6. But I would say about Yellowstone, and it's the oldest national park, not just in the United States, but in the world. It, to me, is a national park that, whether you're a single, a couple, a large family, whether you have grandma and grandpa with you and, you're towing 2 little kids, there's something for everybody in that park. And one of the neat features is that you're on a high plateau that's above a volcanic caldera that is active. They assure us it's not due to blow it anytime soon, but that's why you have so many thermal features in Yellowstone. And by the way, and I don't know if you're going to mention it today, but for those who are intrigued by going to Iceland, which I've never been, but I understand is quite beautiful, while it has geothermal features that are famous worldwide, Yellowstone has far more. So again, for starters, if that sort of thing intrigues you, I'd say go to Yellowstone.
Let me throw something in, because you just triggered a thought that I hadn't thought about. In Iceland, they've got so much geothermal that electricity and hot water is free.
Yeah.
And it's, you go to these plants and it's incredible, absolutely incredible. Okay, back to you. Sorry.
That's okay. I'm going to try to describe this in simplistic terms. The beauty for me of Yellowstone is, unlike a lot of national parks where you have a high expectation about seeing animals and then you're wild animals and then you're a little disappointed, I can assure our viewers that Yellowstone will not disappoint. And if you come in through the south end, coming up from Jackson Hole and the Tetons and moving north, just picture in your mind, if you had a map of Yellowstone in front of you, the numeral 8 or the figure 8, basically 2 circular routes, one on top of the other. The one below, if your time in Yellowstone is minimal, I would suggest taking that route. That gives you some of the more dramatic features in the park, such as the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, which is absolutely magnificent, and you can hike down along the edge of the magnificent waterfall. And And the canyon there is like a gold yellow from the minerals in the rock, and then set against that foamy blue waterfall. It's one of the most beautiful sights you'll ever see in your life. You have the Hayden Valley, which is one of two valleys where you see most of the animals, which include buffalo, elk, black bear, grizzly. One of the few places left in the United States where there are grizzly bears. In the top loop of the figure eight is the Lamar Valley. And typically up there, you'll see the wolves that have been reintroduced into Yellowstone, and they prey upon the elk herds. But in terms of attractions, a good number of them are in that southern loop, and including Old Faithful, which of course anybody going to Yellowstone wants to see. It shoots off roughly about every hour and a half. I have a picture on a wall upstairs when the boys were little. We set the alarm and got up early. It was still dark, and we got over to Yellowstone, and we were it. And then eventually one or two people with cameras showed up and set up tripods where I was, but there were no crowds. And it was pure serendipity, but Old Faithful went off as the sun broke over the hills that are a backstop to Old Faithful. And it's one of the best photographs I've ever taken. And I still love looking at it all these years later. But be sure to see Old Faithful. The Geyser Basin is in that south loop. And you can see a lot of geysers. They have boardwalks, both to protect you and to make the walking easy. So from a senior perspective, you're not going up and down stairs. The only caveat I would say is that if you're a person who needs a bench, like I do, every so many feet to rest your legs, they don't provide much that way on these boardwalks. So, you've got to give some thought to that. Maybe use a wheelchair. So you have basically the animals you want to see, set in gorgeous nature, the thermal features, which are unique, the overall landscape, which runs from, grassy valleys to mountain backdrops and beautiful pines. There's a place called Fishing Village where I did a little bit of fishing, but the main thing I liked about Fishing Village was it was so peaceful. And you have the indigenous cutthroat trout that are absolutely beautiful fish with a lot of red around their gills, and it's fun. That's their catch and release. But I enjoy doing a little bit of fishing there. But Yellowstone has, again, to be a little redundant, something for everybody. And in terms of the hikes, you can take hikes into the backcountry, or you can take day hikes, or you can take short hikes. I mean, there's plenty to do and plenty to see. And I think the last kind of caveat or suggestion, I guess would be the better word. Sorry about the dog in the background. Is I would suggest going to Yellowstone if you can in late spring before, if you're childless or your kids have grown up and left the house, if you can go just before school's let out across the country, the park isn't crazy. It's a lot more peaceful, and you don't get into these long queues of cars backed up because of bison crossing the road. Or go in the fall, within a week or two after the kids go back to school. And obviously, if you have children, then you're going to end up going during the summer. And then just be aware that it may look like it's going to be an easy drive on the park map, but somebody sees a buffalo and 40 cars stop to take photographs, and everybody backs up. So you can have some long drives. Next would be Yellowstone would be Grand Canyon National Park. And one of the reasons, there are people, I recall the first time our family went to the South Rim in Arizona. One of the park rangers, that we went on a little walk with along the rim, said the typical tourist time spent at the Grand Canyon was 30 minutes, which I was astounded. They said literally people pull up in a car, get out, look across the rim, take a few pictures, and then get back in the car and get the hell out, which boggled my mind. I don't know what they expected or if something disappointed them, because the Grand Canyon is something that once you see it, you'll never forget it. And at the time, when I was younger, I was really into photography. And the Grand Canyon is a beautiful venue for photography, but it's also one of the great challenges, because what you think you're going to capture, and of course today it's all digital, but back when I was a young man, it was all film. But what you think you're going to capture, you get back and it's kind of bleached out. You need to take your photographs in the early morning hours, or an hour before sunset or at sunset. You need to use the polarizing lens, because that red sandstone is very difficult with the bright sunlight on it to take good photographs. You want a contrast between where the sun is hitting the sandstone in areas of shade. And what I've never done, but would like to do before I'm gone, and I've told you about this, Dick, is I'd love to go to the North Rim, and particularly in the winter, when you have snow in the canyon, and you have the contrast between the white snow and those sheer red cliffs and the river below, and have some fun taking photos of that. Now, the most popular place to visit the Grand Canyon is the South Rim. I believe the next most popular would be the North Rim, but you also have the East Rim and the West Rim. In the West Rim, an Indian tribe has built a glass half circle that extends out over the canyon, and you're literally walking on glass, so you can look straight down into the canyon, unless you're like me and you're scared of heights, or you can stand at the handrail as you venture out onto that platform and look out at it, but you have a totally unobstructed view of the canyon. My understanding, and I've not been there, is that the east rim of the canyon gives you your best views of the river below that in part has carved the canyon. A lot of people have a simplistic view that the Colorado River is what has carved out this huge and magnificent canyon, but it's also a function of wind and rain and ice and erosion that's worked along with the fact that the river has carved it out and the canyon is actually raising from the Earth's surface. So, you know, it helps that river cut into the rock. But it's something I would call the Grand Canyon most definitely a bucket list item. You need to see it because it's nonpareil. There's not another place in the United States that is anything like it. My next place, and I'm trying to mix it up a bit, and what I'm about to describe, I've seen any number of times, and I'm combining it. It's Big Sur on the California coast on Highway 1, along with the Monterey Peninsula, which is north of Big Sur. That is one of the most magnificent drives in the United States, in the continental United States. You have the sheer cliffs, the pounding surf below, the kelp beds, mountains that backdrop it. You know, it's not exactly England's White Cliffs of Dover. It's more magnificent in a different way. It might be more akin to, and you would know better than I, Dick, but I like to watch Aerial America, and they also have an international piece, but I've seen these coastal settings in Scotland and Ireland, and that Big Sur coastline to me comes to mind as being comparable. And the comment I would make is it's about 100-mile stretch, and it ends going northbound at Carmel by the Sea. And if you can't make the trip north and south, I would suggest taking the route Highway 1 southbound. That puts you on the ocean side of the highway. And the highway is neat. It's fun to drive. You never know what the conditions are. You could have fog. You could have bright sunshine. You could have a landslide. If I had it to do over again, and I don't drive anymore, but in my reverie, I'd rent a convertible. I mean, I'd do it right. Maybe like a Mustang convertible, where I could do envision myself a bit of a race driver and have that top down and smell that salt air and look at that foaming surf striking against the rocks and cliffs below. There's a magnificent bridge that spans a portion of Big Sur, the coastline, and it's an architectural masterpiece. And I believe it was constructed back in the 30s, and that's one of the iconic photos of Big Sur that you typically see, and that's fun to go across. You can either do what I call an old man's trip, which is what I would do these days, where you take the route and there are ample number of turnouts and just take in the views that way. Or if you're younger and you have good strong legs, there are any number of hikes down to the beaches below. Typically they're wooden steps, and you might have up to 100 steps to get down there. But they also have some hikes up into the mountains. There's one hike called the Ridge Hike. And if you take that one, and it's a pretty good piece of walking, you can actually get into a redwood forest, which is kind of neat. Lastly, Big Sur is home of the California condor, a bird that almost became extinct, in which they're trying to bring back the population. Farther up the coastline of California is the Monterey Peninsula and the Del Monte Forest. It's very beautiful, very peaceful. For people who love golf, that's where the famous Pebble Beach golf course is. For people who like literature, John Steinbeck has written on the area a lot. In fact, I would recommend, if you're going to go to the Monterey Peninsula, to read a Steinbeck book on the area. That to me makes it all the more fun. Two venues I would recommend is the Monterey Aquarium. It's absolutely terrific. Kids would love it, very much. And then there's a restaurant there that was one of the great meals I've had in my whole life. And I checked today to make sure it's still there, and it is, and it's still getting rave reviews. It's called the Sardine Factory. And don't let the name fool you. It's very elegant. It's pricey, but every now and then you gotta spend the money to enjoy a meal and a dining experience that you won't soon forget. So anyways, it's one of the neatest places in California, in terms of its topography. Landscape has so many beautiful things to see. It's a shame that the people and the Democrats have ruined it. But even today, I would recommend, if you're in California, or to take that route. It's stunning. Let's see what's next on my hit parade. Next is, and you can combine these, it's Zion National Park and Bryce Canyon National Park. And Bryce is about 100 miles north of Zion. So you can easily do both of these. I've stayed longer at those two parks with my family than just a weekend, but you could do these parks in a 2 or 3 day weekend because of the short distance between the two. And they're in southwestern Utah. And if you have the time and look it up, Utah has 5 national parks. So beyond the prominent ones, Zion and Bryce, there are other options which I won't go into, but you can make quite a vacation and never leave Utah. Basically, you're looking at red sandstone canyons, and that red sandstone offset by the conifer forests, the dark green, and to me, Bryce is the more unique of the two in terms of just a visual image that you'll never forget. And much like I mentioned about the north rim of the Grand Canyon, if I could go back to Bryce, I would definitely go back in the winter months, because you see the top of those unique cliffs bathed in snow, with the red sandstone. That's something beyond dramatic. And again, if you love taking photos, and particularly if you're good at it, you can get some stunning views there. I would describe both parks as principally parks where you do a lot of hiking. They have great hiking trails. So, you have to be, particularly in the summer months, because of the heat, you have to be in pretty good shape. And I wouldn't recommend it, Dick, for you or I. We'd be more the sit in the visitor center in the air conditioning and listen to the ranger talks and drive through the two parks and pull out at the turnouts and so forth. But in my younger days, I'd put one of the boys on my shoulders, and the other one would always be 50 yards ahead of Kathy and I, and we did most of the hikes, and they're just dramatic and stunning, and a real joy. It's again, I'm trying to describe places today that will remain memories. They're not kind of your average vacation. These are places that will be etched in your memory. Hope I haven't left any out. My last choice, Dick, am I doing okay on time?
Yes, we've got 20 more minutes.
Oh, I'm probably going to give you more time than you need, but my last choice, I've been to South Dakota a lot on business, Rapid City. I've seen Mount Rushmore once, and the Badlands National Park, which is right in that vicinity, and I could kick myself. I never made an extra day to go see that, and I never took my family to see it. So this is the one place of the 6 places I've chosen today that I haven't seen in person. But the beauty of the Badlands, and the reason I selected it, is it used to be covered by an ocean. And if you're up in that area of South Dakota, you have a combination of the grassy plains, and just, picture Indians and buffalo herds and grasslands and harsh winds and that sort of thing. Then where Mount Rushmore is the Black Hills Gold region, and Mount Rushmore may be unlike any of the other choices I gave you. Much like the Statue of Liberty, most people have seen photographs, countless photographs of Mount Rushmore, and they may think in their minds, well, I've seen it. I don't want to go all the way to Rapid City, South Dakota to see something I've seen in countless photographs. But at least from my point of view, when I saw it, I was thoroughly impressed, and just stood gazing at it. And the photographs do not do it justice. And as I think most people know, it's a magnificent sculpture carved into the mountainside of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, and Teddy Roosevelt. And I mean, it's a real McCoy in the sense that the sculptor really captured their faces, their features. There's no doubt in your mind who you're looking at. And then, while you're there, you can enjoy those mountains and the forest there, and do take a look in the shops at examples of the Black Hills gold jewelry, because that's pretty unique. Now back to the Badlands, and it's hard to believe when you're that far north in the United States, and in terms of the Badlands, you're seeing an area that looks like no man, no animal could survive in. Desolate, these stark rivulets and little canyons and gullies, and it's kind of like looking at a gnarled tree, but you're looking at topography. I don't know if I'm describing it well, but in my mind's eye, I am. It just looks totally uninhabitable. So, number one, to think that people have lived there for thousands of years, nomadic tribes, Indian tribes, particularly the Sioux. And then secondly, to know that a zillion years ago was all covered in seawater. One of the largest fossil beds in the United States is there in the Badlands. And it's a great place for finding fossils.
Well, also, for those that haven't been there, you got to follow the signs to Wall Drug. And Wall Drug is the ultimate tourist techie place to go.
Oh, no kidding.
That's one thing. But also, you took one of my favorite places, because we used to go to Rapid City every summer, horseback riding, Sullivan Lake, Harney Peak, in that area. And as I've been trying to clean up around the house, I found a whole bunch of Indian arrowheads and stuff that were in a cave in that area. I mean, incredible area. In fact, they have a road that's paved in garnet. And so you just kind of scoop it up, stick it in a bottle, and take it home. I mean, it's something else.
Well, I think in all these choices, in however long, whether you need 6 years to do it or 2 or 3, you'll see dramatic changes in the landscape. And if you stand back from that and think about it, it just shows how magnificent the United States is in terms of the things we have here. Certainly internationally, there are wonderful places, and Dick, you're one of the best people I know to describe that. But I just want to reinforce the fact that if you've been homebound for a while, particularly in the last couple of years due to the pandemic and all of the government imposed restrictions and mandates and nonsense, if you're starting to think about getting the family out and getting back in the vacation groove, and if your family is grown up and it's just you and your wife, these are any of the 6 I talked about in podcast 37 are, I think, unique in their own right. And if you end up not agreeing with me on everything, I'm sure we'll agree on a few. That's the way I would sum it up.
Okay. Well, I just, there are so many neat places to go that I'm having real problems coming up with 6 places. But then it hit me. We've been trying to get to Canada again for 2 years. In fact, the trip was paid for 2 years ago on the Rocky Mountaineer, which is a luxury train that goes through the Rockies, Lake Banff, the Castle Hotels, etc. And it just hit me that one of my favorite places to go is Canada. And what I want to talk about is Eastern Canada. Nobody goes to Eastern Canada as far as I know. Everybody wants to go to Western Canada, Vancouver, Victoria, etc. And I've been there so many times, and I like it. But when we went to Eastern Canada, I mean, it was incredible. First of all, it's like going to Europe on the cheap. You fly into Quebec, for example, which I'll speak to in a moment, but it's like going to Europe. They speak French. You got your French restaurants, Michelin stars, the whole thing. My favorite hotel is the Frontenac, which was built by Canadian Railway. It's one of the castle hotels in Canada that stretch all the way over to Vancouver. Lake Banff being the famous one, where the hotel's right on the on the edge of the lake. But it's incredible. The service is incredible. The food is incredible. I mean, it's like going to Europe on the cheap. Now, a lot of people say, well, you got to go to Montreal, you got to do this, you got to do that. I'm not of what I would call the Midwest, middle part of the country with the wheat fields and everything else. Growing up in Minnesota, we went to Fort William, Port Arthur, periodically to shop. But I'm not sure that captures the Europe that I'm talking about. Whereas Quebec, again, pronounced Quebec, it's like Europe. I mean, period. Easy walking area, great tourist site to start off from. Now, during the recession, of a few years ago, Quebec really hit the tubes. But now it's back, it's shining. Tours and everything are really great. So I would recommend Eastern Canada, but start out in Quebec. And from there, we're talking about going to Newfoundland, Labrador. I mean, it's incredible, and there aren't a lot of people. And again, I'd recommend that if you're planning it, go with my tours by local groups, which we've done. Unbelievable. I mean, they cover wherever you want to go. For example, Oak Island, that's popular on TV, the famous treasure they've been trying to find for God knows how long. You can do that. But again, Halifax, Newfoundland, that area. And maybe one of the reasons, and of course, Prince Edward Island. My mom's side of the family is from there. And so, Anne of Green Gables, I guess. That's on Prince Edward Island. They now have a bridge that takes you all the way over. I'm not into high bridges, so I would take the ferry. I mean, it is so diverse, it's unbelievable. Now let's talk about one of the reasons I like it. I'm a seafood nut. You go to Halifax, where my great-great-grandfather is from. Otherwise, he would have been president, but because he was born in Canada, that never happened. But I've got letters between him and Roosevelt and McKinley and, you name it. You go to a restaurant and a lobster is $40. How about you go right to a place like Ryder's Seafood, where they bring this in from the sea and sell it as a wholesaler? How'd you like lobster for $5 a shot? And if that doesn't fill you up, get some mussels while you're at it. And then if that doesn't fill you up, grab a few oysters while you're at it. And it's going to cost you 20 bucks probably, if you can finish it. That's the one thing. The other
Dick,
thing,
Dick,
yes,
I could finish it.
okay. Well,
I think I'd have a second lobster.
yeah, now the only thing I understand about Ryder's Seafood is if you want to eat at their site, their warehouse, you've got to make reservations. You can't just walk in and grab it, but you make reservations. Again, tours through locals, and they will take care of that. What you want to look at, again, starting from that area, is you can take the Cabot Trail, for example. It takes you up through the north, and it's incredible. Time to go. 15 October is normally the time when the colors max out. And as a guy from Minnesota who thought I'd seen fall colors, it's nothing compared to the way it was from Halifax north. Absolutely unbelievable.
Sorry to interrupt, but help me. As you move east, say from Toronto to the coast,
Yes.
Is there less of a French influence or more of a French influence?
Interesting question. My experience would indicate less. In Quebec, everybody speaks French. And in fact, I walked up to some little kid and I said, "Parlez-vous français?" And the kid said, "Oui, oui." But as you go further west, that's where the English came in. A lot of the ships that everybody thinks went to
You mean
Boston.
further east?
I mean, yeah, further east. A lot of the people that settled in the United States originally came in through Canada, and everybody assumes that they came in from Boston or whatever. But they weren't. They were English. They came into Halifax, and then from Halifax, because of the French-English hassle, they moved south into the United States. So basically, for example, the oldest city, and I'm looking it up right now if I can find it. Oh, darn it. It begins with L. Anyways, it's a city that was formed in 1735 by the English, and the original homes are still there. Look, I got to find this. Just give me a minute here. Quebec City.
While you're looking, and just further the comment you made, my maternal grandfather, his ancestry was French Canadian, and then migrated into Michigan.
Yeah, well, a lot of people did it. Here it is, the town of Lunenburg in Nova Scotia. Incredible. I mean, we're talking about buildings that people live in that were put up 300 years ago. And that's, if you take the Cabot Trail that I was suggesting, you go up to Lunenburg and then you come back down. But the colors and everything are absolutely incredible. But again, getting back to Quebec, there are all kinds of fantastic tours like on St. Lawrence. Now, we know in Minnesota you have the St. Lawrence Freeway, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of people don't realize St. Lawrence, the lake, the river, the whatever, started out in that area. And you take some of these tours, and it's just incredible. What's also incredible is how cheap it is. I mean, if you were to go to Europe or you were to go to a lot of these other places and take these tours, I mean, they're expensive. But in Canada, you're talking living in a castle, gourmet meals, French breakfast or English, if that's what you like. The English are the ones that have the tomatoes and sausage and everything for breakfast. You just can't beat it. And when we talk about going across Canada, and staying at all these different castle hotels, which have now been bought out by the Fairmont chain, it's like living in a castle. I mean, it's unbelievable. And the service is absolutely unbelievable.
Now, if you fly into Quebec, in terms of the other places you're talking about moving, towards the East Coast, are you suggesting that can be driven, or do you have to get back in a plane, or do you get on a train? What do you do?
It can be driven. As a matter of fact, rental cars are a biggie. But again, getting a driver for tours through local, it's not going to cost that much. But as you switch from Quebec province to Nova Scotia, Halifax, Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland, you are going to have to fly, or you're going to have to take a ferry. But again, the flights are reasonable. And I used to recommend Air Canada because their service was great. But trying to get to Canada this time around, it's been hell and high water. And of course, they keep
That's a shame,
the flights and all the rest of this.
Yeah, I used to fly Air Canada quite.
Yeah, it's not bad. Now, when you get past Newfoundland, people say, well, don't you want to go to Labrador? Well, my dad went to Labrador back when Grenville was developing the area as a missionary. And it still is kind of, well, I'm not, I won't say what I would want to say, but it's not as developed. Whereas when you go to St. John's, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, Halifax, and some of these areas, they're quintismal English settlements. In fact, one of the things I did when I was in Halifax, I went to a church and they were having a ceremony for seamen who drowned in an accident. Right? And so I asked for a copy of their Bible and they gave it to me. And the Bible was like our Bible, but it was all kind of a seafaring type thing. I mean, it was absolutely fascinating. And they have Irish pubs, for example, where you can get, the original food, and the bands are there for free, and they, entertain you while you eat. I would assume you're kind of talking about the way that Ireland was in maybe the 30s, the 40s at the latest. I mean, absolutely incredible.
When you say, let me interrupt you. When you say Canada is like going to Eastern Canada is like going to Europe on the cheap.
Yes.
And I know it's at any moment in time, and it's a function of exchange rates. But can you kind of make a general statement? I mean, is it 10% less than Europe, 20%, 15%? I wonder how you're defining cheap.
Well, you and I were talking about cheap a while back, and the fact that a 5-star hotel in Europe was like $600. Now you get back to the Canadian-US thing. Don't forget their currency is far less than us on exchange.
Right.
Prices are pretty much the same, but when you're saving maybe 10-15% on the exchange rate, you save. Now you talk about living in a castle. If I'm not mistaken, we were paying about $300 a night to live in a castle.
Yeah.
And again, if you go and check out tours by local, again, I strongly recommend a travel agent, but you're going to find, I don't remember how much we paid for the trip through Halifax, going up to Lunenburg and coming back down. But it was not that much at all. And the meals were incredible. I mean, unbelievable.
The thing that, and I can only speak to photos I've seen, but that would intrigue me about Quebec, and tell me if I'm wrong, is the architecture.
Oh, yeah. The architecture, you've got squares, they're all in French, a lot of them. Some of the old churches and everything are just incredible. God, artwork, metalwork. I mean, all kinds of stuff is now available. The other thing that's interesting is if you stay at the Frontenac, but you want to go down to the French sector where all the restaurants are, you take a funicular, which is kind of like an elevator. It takes you from one street down to another. So
Oh,
for a person like me with limited mobility, it's really easy to get around. I mean, it's incredible. If you want to stay on the upper level and go over by the military, oh, I can't remember what it's called, but basically is the Gendarme Square, where the police and the barracks used to be. There are restaurants there too. I mean, you can eat your way through there. And they've recovered so well from the recession that is absolutely unbelievable. But you know, the same attitude I have about Montreal, I have about Warsaw, Poland. You know, I love Krakow. I don't like Warsaw because I like the old Europe, the ambiance, etc., the delis, you know, those types of things.
I hear you.
And again, if you want to go to Europe but don't want to spend thousands of dollars, go to Europe and Canada. And you know, if you want to start out on the East Coast of the U.S., Maine, Vermont, whatever, that's a great way to start. You know, you could drive to Quebec, for example, you know, go along the East Coast, Martha's Vineyard or whatever, and then take a plane wherever you wanted to go, because they are very short distances. And if I had more time to get myself organized, I'd tell you exactly what it costs, but it wasn't that much. Unless you push me, in which case I can give you the prices in, you know, in a moment.
How about museums in Quebec?
Oh, God. First of all, they're really into old stuff. One of the neatest museums that I found was a place that did copper work, bowls, the copper plaques, you know, the religious plaques and stuff, art galleries, old English, French type things, along with very, very modern type things. A lot of the places are old businesses that have been kind of revived, like God, what do you call them? Where they make honey? You know, old stores with a really low ceiling, and you have to kind of go in like so, and you get honey, or you go to the old bakeries and you get the old styles, or you go to, of course, my favorite are the delis. They're absolutely incredible. Oh, it's terrible. You know, we want to go back. It's one of the few places that I really want to go back to because it was so enjoyable.
Yeah. Well, it sounds nice. And the thing about, as you're aware, I did a lot of business predominantly in Western Canada, but I would go into Toronto on occasion.
Yeah, well, next time around, I'll get organized and I'll talk about Western Canada, Vancouver, Victoria, etc. Totally different. Totally different. It's kind of a teaser. Western Canada, Vancouver, Victoria, has the largest Filipino population and the largest Chinese population outside of the Philippines and in China.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unbelievable. I have a lot of friends from that area. And again, fantastic seafood, relatively cheap prices. But it's like going to London. That's kind of the difference. I view Victoria and Vancouver as London, where they served, you know, afternoon tea and everything else, where as opposed the East was more of kind of a Frenchy, well, also English, but more and more of a provincial.
Yeah. The thing you haven't mentioned, and it's easy to take it for granted if you've been to Canada lots of times, but it's worth mentioning for people here in the United States. Canada is so spick and span clean. And the thing, I don't know when you were last there. I've never read about it. I used to go to Calgary more than any place in Canada, and you wouldn't see homeless camps like you see in most of the U.S. cities. I don't recollect seeing graffiti, litter. I mean, it was, I eventually got used to it and it was an expectation, but my first few trips to Canada, that was the thing that I noticed maybe more than anything is that, you know, how do they manage to keep everything so clean and orderly?
Well, you know, one of the things that's interesting, when the Chippewa got driven out of Minnesota and North Dakota, they went along the Canadian border. And of course, they had your typical issues for people that were treated the way they were. And the government has federal programs that are working to correct these things, to include cracking down on certain religious groups that were far less than religious. So you won't find homeless people because they've been provided with housing.
Mhm.
You won't find graffiti because they're very proud people, and they're a very homogeneous in one respect, heterogeneous in another respect. I mean, they're very prideful, and aside from the English-French thing, which I think is more for tourists than the people that live there, even though one of my doctors is from Montreal and speaks French, and we were laughing about it. They just, it's just not like the United States. First of all, people are very civilized to each other. You know, that I think is one of the key points. The fact that people respect each other and they cover each other and back each other, whereas they're not dog eat dog, which unfortunately I think sometimes the United States is.
Yeah.
You know, they care about Canada. You know, if you're looking for good dog food or you're looking for good products, etc., look at the label. A lot of the stuff is made in Canada. Cars that we drive are made in Canada.
Yeah, there are a lot of assembly plants up in the Toronto area.
Yep. And with that, we're way over an hour.
Okay, well, that was a good overview of Eastern Canada, Dick. I'm ready to go.
Strongly recommended. Okay, your turn to say goodbye so you don't get cut off.
No, it's your turn because 2 weeks ago I set out Wiedersehen because you had extolled the virtues of travel in Germany. So
Okay.
since you know a little bit of French, you should say goodbye to our listeners in French.
Okay. Au revoir.
There you go.